My name is Cora Prescott, and I am 29 years old. For most of my life, I lived under the cool, long shadow of a name that meant something in San Francisco. The Prescotts weren't just a family. We were a legacy, etched into the city's skyline through Prescott and Croft, the real estate development firm my great-grandfather founded. Our home in Pacific Heights was a testament to this legacy, a stately Edwardian with serene, panoramic views of the Golden Gate Bridge, its iconic red spires often shrouded in the soft, melancholic fog that I've always loved. Growing up, the fog felt like a metaphor for my future, vast, beautiful, yet ultimately obscuring a predetermined path. The map had been drawn long before I was born. I would attend a top-tier university, I would take a respectable role within the family enterprise, and I would marry a man whose name carried a similar weight, whose family could be discussed with quiet pride over cocktails at the Oakmont Country Club. It was a life of immense privilege, but also one of carefully constructed walls, where love was often conflated with strategy and happiness was a metric tied to public perception. I followed the first part of the map, earning a degree from Stanford. But it was there, amidst the sun-drenched sandstone and sprawling lawns, that my own path began to emerge from the mist. I found a passion not for closing deals or analyzing market trends, but for shaping the earth itself. I fell in love with landscape architecture, the art of creating harmony between the built and the natural, of sculpting spaces that invite quiet reflection and genuine connection. After graduation, I made my first significant departure from the map. I gently declined the corner office waiting for me at Prescott and Croft and instead accepted a junior position at a small, innovative firm called Verdant Designs. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Prescott, were masters of understated disapproval. They called my choice a charming detour, a creative phase I would outgrow. But over the next 7 years, I didn't outgrow it. I grew into it. I poured myself into my work, rising to a senior designer with a portfolio of award-winning public parks and private gardens. They eventually came to accept my career, framing my success as another tasteful accessory to the Prescott name. But they never stopped seeing it as the prelude to my real purpose, a suitable marriage. Their idea of a suitable husband was as clear and unyielding as the view from their living room window, a man with a Stanford MBA, a burgeoning career in finance or tech, and a surname that resonated in the right circles. And that is why Leo Sullivan, with his gentle eyes and calloused hands, was never on their map. I met Leo 2 years ago, not at a gala or a charity auction, but at a benefit concert for a small, inner-city youth program he founded called Rhythm and Roots. While I was there as a patron, a guest of a client, Leo was on stage. He wasn't the main act. He was the reason for the gathering. He ran a workshop that taught at-risk teenagers how to build and play their own instruments, a blend of woodworking and music therapy that was as unique as he was. When he stepped into the spotlight to speak, a hush fell over the room. He wasn't polished or rehearsed. He spoke from the heart, his voice warm and steady, about how a beat-up guitar in his high school music room had been his lifeline, a way to channel the confusion and anger of his youth into something beautiful. He spoke of the quiet confidence he saw blooming in his students as they transformed a block of wood into a source of music, a source of pride. In that moment, I wasn't watching a stranger. I was witnessing a man who had found his true north. After the concert, I felt an uncharacteristic pull to introduce myself. We stood in a corner of the crowded lobby, the buzz of the city's elite fading into a muted hum. He told me about growing up in a small farming town in the Central Valley, the son of a plumber and a school secretary. He'd worked his way through college on a patchwork of scholarships and part-time jobs, earning a master's degree in education. There was no pretense about him, only an authentic kindness and an infectious passion for his work that made my world of blueprints and boardrooms feel a world away. Our first date was a revelation. He didn't take me to a Michelin-starred restaurant with a sommelier. He took me to his workshop, a beautiful, chaotic space in the Mission District that smelled of sawdust and lemon oil. It was filled with half-finished ukuleles and the earnest, off-key sounds of his students' creations. Afterward, we ate at a tiny, family-run Vietnamese restaurant where the owner greeted him with a hug. For the first time in my life, I felt I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to be Cora Prescott, the heiress. I could just be Cora, a woman completely captivated by the man sitting across from me. Our connection deepened with the quiet certainty of a redwood taking root. We came from different worlds, but we shared a common language of values, a belief in purpose over profit, in community over status. 6 months ago, on a weekend trip to the coast, we hiked through the misty, cathedral-like silence of Muir Woods. There, under the ancient canopy, Leo knelt and asked me to be his wife. He presented me not with a diamond, but with a simple, luminous moonstone set in a silver band that had belonged to his grandmother. My yes was the easiest, most certain word I had ever spoken. When I called my parents to share the news, the silence on the other end of the line was heavy with unspoken calculations. "Well, that's news, darling," my mother finally said, her voice a carefully polished surface. "We must have a dinner, all of us, to discuss the plans." That dinner was not a celebration. It was the drawing of a battle line. It took place in our family dining room, a space so formal it felt more like a museum exhibit. The table was set with heirloom china and silver that gleamed under the soft light of a crystal chandelier. Leo, bless his heart, was charming and respectful, but I could feel my parents' assessment of him as cool and thorough as a building inspection. "We will, of course, host the wedding at the Rosewood Estate," my mother announced, as if it were a foregone conclusion. The estate was the crown jewel of Napa Valley venues, a place where society weddings were chronicled in lifestyle magazines. 300 guests, a full-string orchestra, and I've already spoken to Chef Laurent Thierry about the catering. I took a deep breath. "Mother, that's incredibly generous, but Leo and I were hoping for something smaller, more intimate, something that feels like us." My father, Richard, who had been silently observing, set down his wine glass. "Cora, a wedding is not just a party. It is a statement. It's about merging families, strengthening networks. It is what the Prescotts do." His tone was not unkind, but it was absolute, the voice he used when closing a multi-million-dollar deal. "What will our friends think?" my mother added, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. The Harrington's daughter had 400 guests at the Ritz-Carlton last spring. Leo, ever the peacemaker, reached for my hand under the table. "Mr. and Mrs. Prescott," he said, his voice calm. "The most important thing to both of us is that our families are happy. I'm sure we can find a compromise that honors your traditions while reflecting who we are as a couple." But the weeks that followed were not about compromise. They were a slow, relentless campaign of attrition. I found myself in a constant tug-of-war, a weary negotiator between my vision and theirs. I won a few small skirmishes. I chose my own wedding gown, a simple, elegant dress of soft silk, over the jewel-encrusted ball gown my mother favored. I insisted on a menu that included a station with Leo's favorite wood-fired pizzas alongside the formal sit-down dinner. But I lost the war. The guest list swelled to 250, a roster of my parents' business associates and social acquaintances, most of whom I hadn't seen since childhood. The budget climbed to a figure that made Leo physically uncomfortable. "Are you sure this is what you want, Cora?" he asked me one evening, his voice gentle, as we looked over a contract for a photographer whose day rate could fund his entire workshop for 6 months. I hesitated, the truth catching in my throat. "I want to marry you," I said honestly. "Anne, I want my parents to be there, to be happy. I keep thinking that if I just give them this wedding, if they see us happy, they'll finally accept you. They'll see what I see." Looking back, I see the profound naivety in that hope. I believed an extravagant party could solve a fundamental divide. My parents didn't think Leo was worthy of me, and no amount of champagne or hand-calligraphed place cards could ever change that. The lead-up to the wedding became a gauntlet of microaggressions. Every planning session with my mother included a thinly veiled critique of Leo or his family. "Will his parents know the proper attire for a black-tie optional event?" she mused once. "Perhaps we should include a little guide with their invitation." The tension culminated 3 months before the wedding, at another dinner, this time with Leo's parents. Robert and Marion Sullivan were the salt of the earth, warm, unpretentious people who had raised 2 wonderful children on a modest income and an abundance of love. They arrived at our Pacific Heights home with a jar of homemade jam and a nervous excitement that was swiftly extinguished by my parents' polite, icy condescension. We just returned from a sailing trip in the Greek Isles, my father mentioned, swirling his brandy. Do you enjoy sailing, Robert? Leo's father, a man who had spent his life fixing other people's pipes, smiled kindly. I'm afraid the closest I've come is a canoe on the lake near our house. Keeps me busy enough. My mother's contribution was just as pointed. The Rosewood Estate has the most extraordinary collection of David Austin roses, she said, looking at Marion. I imagine your garden is quite different. Oh, it is, Marion replied, her sincerity a stark contrast to my mother's artifice. We're all about tomatoes and zucchini. We have a neighborhood competition every year. I watched Leo, my heart aching, as he navigated the evening with a grace my parents didn't deserve. He steered the conversation to neutral topics, asked my father about the history of our house, and complimented my mother's taste. His parents, too, maintained their dignity, but I could see the quiet hurt in their eyes. With every passing moment, my quiet resentment towards my parents bloomed into a cold, hard anger. After the Sullivans left, I finally broke. How could you be so cruel? I asked, my voice trembling. They're good, kind people, and you treated them like they were something you'd scraped off your shoe. We were perfectly hospitable, my mother replied, her expression one of genuine confusion. But surely you see, Cora, the chasm between our worlds. Every holiday, every family gathering will be this awkward performance. Is that what you truly want for the rest of your life? What I want, I said, my voice rising, is to marry the man I love. I want my family to see the person I see, someone with more integrity and kindness in his little finger than in this entire house. Why isn't that enough? My father's face hardened. Because marriage is not a fairy tale, Cora. It is a merger. It is about protecting a legacy. Speaking of which, has Leo mentioned a prenuptial agreement? The air went out of the room. What? No. And we don't need one. That is non-negotiable, my father stated flatly. No daughter of mine will marry without one. Our lawyers will draft the documents. That was the line. I had bent and compromised and rationalized, but this I could not do. No, I said, the word tasting of freedom. I will not ask the man I love to sign a document that implies I don't trust him. Because I trust him completely. My parents exchanged a look I knew well, the silent, strategic glance of two partners closing ranks. Then we may have to reconsider our financial involvement in this wedding, my father said, his voice like ice. Fine, I shot back, surprising myself with my own ferocity. Leo and I will pay for it ourselves. We'll have the wedding we can afford, the wedding we wanted in the first place. The checkmate seemed to startle them. A tense silence descended. Finally, my mother sighed. Let's not be so dramatic. We will proceed as planned. But this conversation is far from over. They had backed down, but a chill had settled deep into the foundation of our family. That night, when I told Leo everything, he was quiet for a long time. We could just elope, he said softly. Drive up the coast to Oregon. Get married in a forest with two strangers as witnesses. No more fighting. The thought was a balm to my weary soul. It's so tempting, I whispered. But they're still my parents. A part of me still wants them to be there, to see me happy and finally understand. Then we'll see this through, Leo said, his voice a warm anchor in my storm. But remember, Cora, at the end of it all, it's just you and me. The rest is just noise. We moved forward with the wedding plans, but the noise grew louder. I started to notice my parents in hushed conversations that would cease the moment I entered a room. Twice, I caught fragments of phrases, private investigator, due diligence, that sent a cold dread through me. Are you investigating Leo? I confronted them one evening. My father adopted a look of paternal offense. Of course not, Cora. We are simply ensuring the vendors and arrangements are secure. It's standard practice. I didn't believe him, but with only a week to go, I was exhausted. I chose to focus on the finish line, to ignore the red flags waving in my periphery. I told myself that once the wedding was over, once we were married, this would all fade away. I underestimated their resolve. I underestimated how far they would go to control the narrative of my life. 5 days before the wedding, I went to my parents' house to pick up my dress, which had been delivered there after the final alterations. I was feeling a fragile sense of excitement, a glimmer of the joy I was supposed to be feeling. As I walked down the hall, I heard voices from my father's study. "So there's no financial instability, aside from the student loans?" I heard my father ask. A man's voice, one I didn't recognize, replied, "No, sir. He's scrupulous with his finances." As for the relationship with the ex-girlfriend, the timeline is ambiguous. It depends on when you consider their relationship to have officially started. But there was an overlap, my mother's voice cut in, sharp and triumphant. That's the salient point. My blood turned to ice. I pushed the door open. My parents were seated behind the grand mahogany desk. Across from them sat a man in a nondescript suit, a file folder open between them. On the desk were several glossy photographs. They all looked up, startled. "What is this?" I asked, my voice a hollow echo of itself. I already knew. My father recovered first, dismissing the man with a curt nod. After the stranger had scurried away, my father stood, assuming his posture of calm authority. "Cora, we did this for your own protection. We had to be sure. You hired a man to follow him," I whispered. The betrayal was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. "You spied on the man I'm about to marry." "Darling, it's not spying," my mother said, attempting a soothing tone. "It's vetting. Your great-grandmother had a complete background check done on your great-grandfather. It's a tradition, to protect the family." "This is not a tradition," I said, finding my voice. "This is a violation. I am not a corporate asset you need to protect. I am your daughter, and I am in love." "A love based on incomplete information," my father said, his tone hardening. "Leo Sullivan is not the saint you believe him to be." He slid one of the photographs across the desk. It was of Leo, his arm around a smiling woman with dark, curly hair. They looked happy. "Her name is Isabel. This was taken 2 weeks after your first date with him." They were still together. My mind spun, trying to catch hold of a fact, a memory. Leo had mentioned an ex, of course, but he'd said it was over before we met. "There's more," my mother said, her voice softening now that the blow had landed. "They were at an art gallery opening together a month into your relationship." She showed me another photo, Leo, in a suit, the same woman by his side, a date stamp in the corner confirming her words. I left the house in a fog, the photos in my purse feeling like stones. I drove, aimlessly, for hours along the coast, watching the waves crash against the rocks, feeling their turbulent rhythm inside me. Leo had always been the embodiment of honesty. How could he have hidden this? And yet, the photographs were undeniable. That evening, I laid the photos on the small coffee table in my apartment. Leo's face fell the moment he saw them. "Cora, where did you get these?" "My parents," I said, my voice flat. "They thought I should have, as my father put it, all the relevant information." I looked at him, the question hanging between us. "You told me it was over with Isabel before we met." He sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands for a moment before looking up at me, his eyes filled with a pain that mirrored my own. "Cora, it was complicated. Yes, when I first met you, Isabel and I were still entangled. We had been breaking up for months, a slow, painful process. It was over in every way that mattered, but we hadn't had the final, clean break." "So you were seeing us both?" The words tasted like acid. "No, not like that," he said, shaking his head. "After I met you, everything shifted. You were like a compass pointing me to where I needed to go." I ended it with her, officially, a few days after our first date. The gallery opening, her best friend was the artist. I had promised I would be there for her months before. We went as friends. I know I should have told you. I was a coward. I was so afraid you would see it exactly like this, as a betrayal, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you before I even really had you. A part of me, the part that had known his steady goodness for 2 years, believed him instantly. His explanation fit the timeline. We hadn't been exclusive then. But another part, the part that had been raised to look for flaws and calculate risks, was deeply wounded by the omission. "You should have told me, Leo," I whispered. "Finding out this way, from them, it makes everything feel tainted." I know, he said, his voice raw with regret. I made a terrible mistake in not being completely honest. But I need you to believe me, Cora. There was no betrayal of you. By the time of our second date, my heart was already yours. Your parents are using this to drive a wedge between us. Please don't let them. I needed air. I needed space from my parents' manipulations and Leo's pained explanations. I believe you, I said, and I was surprised to find that I did. But I'm so hurt. I think I need a night to myself. He looked devastated, but he nodded. I understand. I love you, Cora. Don't ever doubt that. After he left, I called my best friend, Sophie. I stayed at her small, book-filled apartment in The Haight, a sanctuary of sanity. For 2 days, my parents' calls were relentless. It's not too late to call it off, darling, my mother's voice pleaded from my voicemail. We can say it was mutual. People will understand. I ignored them, and I thought. I weighed 2 years of Leo's unwavering love, his patience, his support, against one poorly handled situation from the very beginning of our relationship, a situation unearthed and weaponized by my parents. The scales were not even close. By the 3rd day, my heart had settled. My trust in Leo was the bedrock. His only crime was a fear of losing me. My parents' crime was a fearless determination to control me. 3 days before our wedding, my decision made, I drove back to my parents' house. I walked in, steeled for another confrontation, my arguments for trust and forgiveness polished and ready. But the house was silent. A thick, unnerving stillness hung in the air. On the gleaming mahogany table in the foyer, propped against a vase of white lilies, was a single, heavy cream envelope. My name was written on the front in my mother's perfect, looping script. My hands trembled as I opened it. The note inside was short, printed from a computer, devoid of all emotion. The wedding has been cancelled. We have taken the necessary steps to manage the situation. Expect a call from our legal counsel. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This had to be their final, desperate gambit. A bluff. I called Leo, my voice shaking. They left a note. They said they cancelled the wedding. A horrifying hour followed. The wedding planner confirmed it, her voice a mixture of pity and professional distance. Your father cancelled everything yesterday, Cora. He cited a family crisis and has already settled all the cancellation fees. One by one, I called them all, the florist, the photographer, the musicians. The story was the same. My parents had systematically, efficiently, dismantled our wedding. The final, crushing blow came from the event manager at the Rosewood estate. I'm so sorry, Miss Prescott, she said, sounding genuinely regretful. Your father made it very clear that if we were to rebook the event with you directly, his firm, Prescott and Croft, would make our future zoning and permit applications in the county extremely difficult. We can't risk that. They hadn't just withdrawn. They had scorched the earth. I was sitting on the grand staircase, the world tilting around me, when Leo arrived. I showed him the note and told him everything. I expected him to be furious. Instead, he simply sat down beside me, took my hand, and held it. I am so sorry they did this to you, he said, his voice a low, steady anchor. But listen to me. This changes nothing about us. We can still get married. Maybe not on Saturday and maybe not in Napa, but we will get married. His calm centered me. I won't let them win, I said, a new resolve hardening within me. I won't fight them. I won't beg. That's the game they want me to play. This is our life. If they choose not to be in it, that is their loss. We packed my things, my dress, my suitcase for the honeymoon we would still take, the few personal treasures I had in the house. As we walked out the door, I took one last look at the home where I grew up. I felt a profound sense of grief, but also, for the first time, a startling sense of liberation. Back at Leo's small, cozy apartment, the dam finally broke. I collapsed onto his sofa and wept, not the quiet, dignified tears of a Prescott, but the raw, ragged sobs of a daughter who had just been orphaned by choice. Leo held me, letting me grieve, murmuring, I'm here. We're in this together. When the tears subsided, my phone rang. It was Sophie. Cora, what is going on? Your mother just called my mom, spinning some vague story about how the wedding is off because you discovered something deeply troubling about Leo. She's poisoning the well. After I explained, Sophie was indignant. Those monsters. We are not letting them win. Leo, you call your family. I'll start calling our friends. We'll tell them there's been a family dispute, but the wedding is on. We just need a new where. Is that what you want? Leo asked me softly after the call. To try and pull something together for this weekend? I thought of my parents' cold, calculated cruelty. Yes, I said, the words solid and sure. I will not let them dictate the timeline of my life. It won't be their wedding. It will be ours. That night, we began to build a new wedding from the ashes of the old one. Leo's parents offered their backyard. Friends volunteered to cook, to play music, to arrange flowers. By morning, a fragile, beautiful new plan was taking shape, one built not on wealth and status, but on love and community. I felt heartbroken, but also, strangely, hopeful. The next morning, a call came from an unknown number. Ms. Prescott? This is Jonathan Blackwell of Blackwell, Stern and Associates. I am calling on behalf of your parents. He proceeded to inform me, in a voice devoid of any warmth, that my parents were taking steps to protect the family assets. He spoke of a clause in my trust fund, a fund established by my grandparents, that gave the trustees, my parents, discretion to withhold funds in the event of an unsuitable life choice. He informed me that my access to the family's Lake Tahoe cabin was rescinded, and that any gifts purchased for the wedding were considered family property and must be returned. It was a declaration of war. When I told Leo, his face went pale. Cora, maybe we should just postpone. I never wanted to cost your family. No, I said, my voice firm. They think money is my weak spot. They think they can buy my obedience. I don't care about the trust fund, Leo. I care about us. We spent the morning with a kind, sharp-witted family lawyer Sophie recommended. He listened to our story and smiled. They're bluffing, he said. At least about the trust. I'll need to see the documents, but a grandparent's trust can't usually be altered by the parents with new conditions. It's an intimidation tactic. As we left his office, my phone buzzed with messages from friends. My mother had been calling them, subtly spreading her narrative of concern for my well-being, implying Leo had some dark secret. It was painful, but it was also clarifying. It showed me who my real friends were. And then there was the incredible, unwavering support of the Sullivan family. You are our daughter now, Cora, Marian told me over the phone, her voice thick with emotion. No conditions attached. The contrast between my family's transactional love and their unconditional embrace was a lesson in itself. But what I didn't know, as we frantically tried to piece together a celebration, was that a force more powerful than my parents' influence was already in motion. An ally I never expected was about to step out of the shadows and change everything. 48 hours after I found the note, the doorbell to Leo's apartment rang. I opened it to find my grandmother, Margaret Prescott, standing on the welcome mat. My father's mother. At 85, she was still the most formidable woman I knew, her posture perfect, her silver hair coiled in an elegant chignon. She lived in New York and her visits were rare, meticulously planned events. Grandma, I breathed, stunned. Cora, dear, she said, her voice calm but her eyes sharp. May I come in? I believe we have some things to discuss. She stepped inside, her presence filling the small apartment with a quiet authority. She looked around, not with judgment, but with genuine curiosity. This is lovely. It has a warmth your parents' house lacks. She turned to me. And before you ask, your parents have no idea I'm here. In fact, they would be apoplectic. She sat on the sofa and patted the cushion beside her. Sit, my dear. It's time I told you a story. She took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I am beyond disappointed in Richard and Eleanor, she began. Their behavior is a disgrace to the Prescott name, the real one, not the one they've invented. She paused. I'm not surprised, though, because 65 years ago I was you. I stared at her. I'd only ever known the story of her perfect, society-approved marriage to my grandfather. Before your grandfather, she said, her gaze distant, there was a man named Daniel. He was a jazz musician, the most brilliant, soulful man I had ever met. My parents were horrified. He had no money, no pedigree, nothing but a trumpet and a heart full of music. What happened? I whispered. They did to me what your parents are doing to you. They threatened me. They shamed me. They told me I would be throwing my life away, disgracing the family. A shadow of old pain crossed her face. And I let them win. I broke it off with Daniel. I married your grandfather. I grew to love Harrison. We built a good life. But I never, not for one day, forgot the music. I don't want you to live with that kind of silence, Cora. She reached into her elegant handbag and pulled out a thick envelope. Which brings me to this. Your parents seem to have forgotten that I am the primary trustee of the fund my husband and I established for you. They are secondary. They have absolutely no legal authority to withhold it from you based on their disapproval of your marriage. She handed me the envelope. It contained a letter from her lawyer confirming my unconditional rights to the trust. I've already instructed my attorney to transfer the full amount into a new account, solely in your name. It should have been done years ago. Tears filled my eyes. Grandma, Hush, dear. That's not all. A small, satisfied smile touched her lips. I spent the morning on the telephone. I spoke with the manager at the Rosewood estate. I reminded him of the sizable donation our family foundation, which I control, made to the local hospital where his wife is a surgeon. I also had a chat with your father's partners at Prescott and Croft, reminding them that my shares still grant me a considerable voice in the company's ethical conduct. The doorbell rang. It was a courier with a letter from the Rosewood estate. It confirmed that our wedding reservation for Saturday had been reinstated, with their deepest apologies for the misunderstanding. Throughout the morning, more messages arrived. The vendors were all back on board. When Leo returned, I introduced him to the legendary Margaret Prescott. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I see it, she said. He has kind eyes. And he's not afraid of you. That's important. Later, as she prepared to leave for the hotel she had booked, I hugged her tightly. Grandma, I asked, my voice thick, since my father won't be there, would you walk me down the aisle? For the first time in my life, I saw tears in my grandmother's eyes. My dear Cora, she whispered. It would be the greatest honor of my life. The wedding day was perfect. The sun shone on Napa Valley as I walked down the aisle on my grandmother's arm. Our wedding was smaller, more intimate than my parents had planned, but every person there was present with a full and loving heart. The empty chairs where my parents should have been were a small, sad note in a beautiful symphony. During the reception, another courier arrived. It was a note from my parents. We maintain our position that this is a profound mistake. We hope that in time, you will come to your senses. I showed it to Leo. He folded it gently and tucked it into his pocket. That's their story, he said, taking my hand. We get to write ours. And we are. It has been a year. My relationship with my parents is a slow, careful work of reconstruction. They have not apologized, but the silence has been broken by hesitant phone calls and one awkward, formal dinner. They're trying, in their own flawed way, to find a path back. They're beginning to see Leo not as a deficit, but as a man who makes their daughter happy. This journey has taught me that boundaries are not walls to keep others out, but lines drawn in the sand to protect the sacred ground of your own self-respect. It taught me that family is not always the one you are born into, but the one you build with love and fierce loyalty. The crisis that almost broke us became the foundation on which we built our life. It was the moment I stopped being a Prescott and started, truly, to be myself. My grandmother gave me back my wedding, but in doing so, she gave me something far more valuable, the courage to live a life that is my own, to follow the music of my own heart, no matter how much noise the world makes. And that is a legacy far greater than any building or bank account.